On a Wednesday morning in May, inside the glass headquarters of a global healthcare tech company in Atlanta, a black intern named Aaliyah Brooks spoke up once in a meeting and watched an entire room decide she had overstepped. To the executives around the table, she was supposed to be invisible, a temporary badge, a summer resume line, a quiet "yes, ma'am," in a world that rewarded silence and punished questions. But in less than 12 days, a 6-year paper trail, emails, policy drafts, compliance memos, and meeting minutes would be read aloud in front of the board. And when it was, the CEO, who belittled her, would go pale in real time, because the documents didn't just prove she was right, they proved he had known. This is a story about what happens when power mistakes youth for weakness, when authority confuses confidence with credibility, and when an intern, an underdog in the purest sense, refuses to let the truth die just because it's inconvenient. It starts, like so many corporate disasters do, with a minor concern that someone powerful calls a distraction. Aaliyah Brooks was 21, the oldest daughter of a mother who never got to be tired. She grew up in Decatur, Georgia, in an apartment where the AC rattled like it was fighting for its life, and the refrigerator always had a little something inside, even when money was tight, because her mother, Denise, believed empty shelves did something to a child's spirit. Denise cleaned offices for years, then trained as a medical assistant, and finally landed a job in patient registration at a clinic. She wasn't paid like she was essential, but she knew. The insurance codes, the intake forms, the quiet panic behind people's eyes when they didn't understand a bill. She could calm an angry patient with nothing but tone and patience. Aaliyah watched that, learned from it, not just the work ethic, the dignity. When Aaliyah was 12, she asked her mother why she never raised her voice at rude people. Denise had answered, "Because I'm not fighting for their approval, baby. I'm fighting for our future." Aaliyah carried those words like a compass. She was smart, not in the loud way, but in the thorough way. The kind of person who read directions before starting. The kind who noticed when two numbers didn't match and kept digging until they did. She got a scholarship to Georgia State University and chose a major that most people didn't understand until they needed it: health informatics. The intersection of medicine and data, the world behind the screens. Her professors told her, "This is the future." Her mother told her, "This is stability." Aaliyah told herself, "This is protection," because she'd seen what happens when systems mishandle information. She'd watched friends' families get denied coverage because of coding errors. She'd watched her own mother fight billing departments for months over a single digit entered wrong. Data wasn't abstract to Aaliyah. Data was life. When she got accepted into a summer internship at a company called Medura Systems, it felt like a door opening. Medura wasn't just a business, it was a machine software used by hospitals to manage patient intake, insurance verification, appointment scheduling, and medical records integrations. Medura sales deck called it streamlined patient outcomes. But everyone who worked there understood the real message. Medura touched millions of patient records, and that meant Medura held power. The CEO of Medura Systems was a man named Grant Hollowell, 47 years old, polished like a magazine cover, hair always perfect, voice always calm. Grant loved telling the story of himself, the self-made leader, the visionary, the man who disrupted healthcare. He had the kind of confidence that came from never being corrected in public. He walked through the headquarters like the building itself owed him space. Employees laughed at his jokes, even when they weren't funny. Executives repeated these phrases: move fast, reduce friction, don't overthink it, like scripture. And Grant Hollowell had a favorite phrase, one he used whenever someone raised a concern: that might slow the machine down. Let's not turn a pebble into a boulder. Aliyah heard that phrase for the first time in her second week. She was assigned to the compliance analytics team intern work mostly. Pulling reports, cleaning spreadsheets, summarizing incident logs for senior staff who didn't want to read the raw detail. Her manager, a mid-level analyst named Priya Nanduri, was quiet but kind. Priya didn't treat Aliyah like a child. She treated her like a trainee who could become dangerous with enough knowledge. Ask questions, Priya told her on day one. In compliance, questions save lives. Aliyah took that seriously. During her third week, she was assigned to help review a set of support tickets flagged as low severity. The company categorized problems the way many companies did: red, yellow, green, urgent, medium, minor. These tickets were green. Most were boring password resets, user confusion, routine bugs. But then Aliyah found 3 tickets that didn't fit. All 3 came from different hospital clients. All 3 described the same issue. Patient portal messages were being routed to the wrong internal inbox. Not always, not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to create risk. The kinds of messages patients sent through portals weren't just, "Can I reschedule?" Sometimes they were, "I'm having chest pain. I think my medication is causing bleeding. I'm pregnant and scared." If those messages were misrouted, the patient could be ignored, not because no one cared, because the message never went where it was supposed to go. Aliyah's stomach tightened. She pulled logs, checked timestamps, compared routing rules. What she found looked like a pattern: small, inconsistent, but real. She brought it to Priya. Priya's face tightened when she saw it. "This is," she started, then stopped. "Where did you find this?" "In the low severity tickets," Aliyah said. "They're marked green, but it's not green." Priya nodded slowly. "You're right. This is not green." Priya escalated it to the compliance director, a man named Scott Leland. Scott was the kind of executive who spoke in cautious sentences, like he'd been trained to avoid blame. He reviewed Aliyah's findings and said, "We need engineering to confirm whether this is systemic." The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday morning at 9:00 a.m. Aliyah wasn't supposed to attend. Interns didn't attend cross-department risk meetings. But Priya brought her anyway. "You found it," Priya said. "You should be there." Aliyah walked into the conference room with her laptop and her notes and immediately felt the temperature of the room. Men in suits, women with carefully neutral expressions, a big screen on the wall with Madura's logo, and at the head of the table, Grant Hollowell himself, the CEO, attending because the hospital client involved in one ticket was a major contract. Aliyah sat near the end, trying to shrink into the chair. She told herself, say nothing unless asked, but then she listened. An engineer spoke first. "We saw the misrouting, but it's rare. Edge cases." Scott Leland nodded, relieved. "So minimal impact." Priya frowned. "But if it involves patient messages?" Grant Hollowell leaned back and smiled as if amused. "Let's breathe," he said. "We're not going to panic because 3 tickets came in. Everything looks like the end of the world when you stare at logs all day." Aliyah's fingers tightened around her pen. Then Grant did what powerful people do when they want to end discussion. He dismissed the risk with a joke. He looked down the table, saw Aliyah's intern badge, and said, "And who's our guest today?" Priya answered quickly. "This is Aliyah Brooks. She's our intern. She actually spotted the pattern." Grant's eyebrows rose, and for a moment, Aaliyah thought he might respect it. Instead, he smirked. "Oh," he said, "so this is a summer project." The room chuckled softly, the safe kind of laughter people use to stay on the boss's side. Aaliyah felt her cheeks burn. Scott tried to redirect. "Grant, it's probably nothing. Engineering says edge cases." Grant nodded. "Exactly. We're not going to slow down product release cycles for a theoretical risk." Aaliyah's heart hammered. And then, because she had been raised by a woman who taught her not to beg for dignity, Aaliyah spoke respectfully, calmly. Once. "Sir," she said, voice steady, "it's not theoretical if it reaches patient portals, even if it's rare. The impact is high. If a patient message about symptoms gets misrouted, that's a delay in care. And if we already have 3 tickets from different clients, that suggests the issue isn't isolated." The room went still. Not because she'd said something wrong, because she'd said it when she wasn't supposed to. Grant Hollowell stared at her like she'd spilled coffee on his suit. Then his mouth curled into a smile that wasn't kind. "Aaliyah," he said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "you're new, which is great. We love enthusiasm. But you need to learn something about how business works." Aaliyah held his gaze, heartbeat in her throat. Grant continued. "Hospitals send messages through portals for all sorts of things. Not everything is urgent. Not everything is a liability crisis. We have teams for that. What we don't do is derail major releases because an intern got scared by log noise." A few people laughed quietly, carefully. Aaliyah's stomach dropped, but she didn't flinch. Grant leaned forward, voice sharper now. "This company is not run by anxiety. It's run by strategy. So let's not turn a pebble into a boulder." Then he looked at Scott. "Mark it for a patch later. Not a stop ship. We're done." Aaliyah didn't speak again. She couldn't. Not because she lacked words. Because she could feel the message pressing down on her. Sit down. Be grateful. Know your place. When the meeting ended, people filed out as if nothing had happened. Priya touched Aaliyah's shoulder gently. "You did the right thing." Aaliyah forced a nod. But as she walked back to her desk, she felt something cold settle inside her. Because she understood what had just happened. Grant Hollowell hadn't just dismissed her. He'd publicly belittled her to teach everyone else a lesson. Don't challenge him. And that would have been the end of it. Just another story of a young black woman being taught that her voice was inconvenient. Except for one detail Aaliyah didn't know yet. The misrouting issue didn't start last week. It didn't start this month. It had a history. And when Aaliyah returned to her desk that afternoon, she opened the ticket log again, searching for similar keywords. Ms. Root, inbox, portal message. She changed the date range. She went back 6 months. Nothing. Then she went back a year. 1 ticket, then 2, then 8. Her skin prickled. She widened the search to 3 years. The list exploded. Dozens. And then, when she filtered by closed without action, she saw the pattern she'd been afraid of. The same kind of ticket. Closed. 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 Always labeled low severity. Always dismissed as edge cases. Always resolved with the same corporate phrase. Monitoring, no further action. Aaliyah's hands trembled slightly over the keyboard. She scrolled further back. 4 years. 5. And then she found the first mention. A meeting note attached to an internal incident report from 6 years ago. A report labeled Confidential Executive Review. Aaliyah clicked it, expecting it to be blocked. It wasn't. And what she read made her mouth go dry. It was an internal email chain dated September 2009, 6 years earlier, when Madura was still Growing, still hungry, still trying to win contracts. The subject line read, "Portal message routing risk. Do not escalate to client." Alia stared at the screen. Then she read the sender, Grant Hollowell, the CEO, 6 years ago. And in that email chain, Grant wasn't dismissing the issue. He was acknowledging it, managing it, controlling it. He had written, "We cannot afford a client facing disclosure. Patch quietly. Limit logs. Keep classification low. We're not losing contracts over hypothetical missed messages." Alia's throat tightened, because now she understood what her one-time speaking up had done. She hadn't embarrassed Grant Hollowell with a new concern. She'd reminded him of an old one he had buried, one that could ruin him if it came back. And suddenly, the way he belittled her made sense. It wasn't just arrogance, it was fear. Alia sat back in her chair, staring at the email thread. She could feel her mind racing, but underneath it was something clearer. A choice. She could do what interns were supposed to do, pretend she hadn't seen it, finish her internship quietly, get her recommendation letter, and go home. Or she could do what her mother had taught her to do when the world tried to make her smaller. She could document. Because that's what her mother did when a landlord lied. That's what her mother did when a clinic lost. Paperwork. That's what her mother did when someone tried to deny reality with confidence. She saved receipts. She wrote down names. She kept records. Alia opened a personal document. She titled it Timeline, Portal, Misrouting, Medura, and she began to copy dates, ticket IDs, meeting notes, email screenshots. She didn't forward anything, she didn't leak anything, she didn't do anything reckless. She documented, quietly, carefully. Because she knew the first rule of fighting power: power lies best when you can't prove it. And Alia was about to become proof. The next morning, Grant Hollowell sent a company-wide email celebrating innovation and responsible growth. It was the kind of email CEOs send when they want the culture to feel optimistic. Alia read it on her phone while sitting in her car and felt something bitter rise in her throat. Responsible growth. While patient messages were being misrouted, while complaints were being buried, while the CEO belittled an intern to silence a risk he'd known about for 6 years. That day, she didn't speak up again in meetings. She didn't need to. She started looking for witnesses, not dramatic witnesses, not people willing to make speeches, quiet witnesses. The kind who had been in the system long enough to know where the bodies were buried. She asked a senior support analyst named Louis, casually, "Have you ever seen Portal misrouting tickets?" Louis didn't answer right away. Then he said softly, "We're not supposed to talk about that." Alia nodded. "I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble, I'm trying to understand." Louis looked around, then leaned closer. "It's been a thing for years. They always told us to close them as monitoring." "Who told you?" Louis swallowed. "Management." "Which management?" Louis exhaled. "Look, you didn't hear it from me." That was all she needed. She spoke to a QA tester named May, who'd been with Medura since the early days. May's face tightened when Alia mentioned misrouting. "That's still happening?" Alia nodded. May's voice went low. "We flagged it in 2019. They told us to downgrade severity because it's rare. It wasn't rare, it just didn't get reported." Alia felt her pulse quicken. "Who told you to downgrade?" May looked at her like she was weighing risk. Then she whispered, "Grant and Scott." They were in the meeting. Alia went home that night and added names to her timeline. Not accusations, just facts. Who was present? Who wrote what? Who decided what? A paper trail isn't just documents. It's patterns of decision-making. And as Alia built her file, she realized something else. The misrouting wasn't the only buried issue. There were other threats. Client complaints about delayed critical alerts, internal memos about understaffed support teams, a compliance note about avoid language that triggers regulatory reporting, a phrase in an old training deck, do not label as patient harms unless confirmed by client in writing. Aliyah felt sick because this wasn't one bug. This was a culture of minimizing risk until risk became disaster. And then, on Friday, disaster arrived. At 2006 p.m., a hospital client escalated an incident, not a green ticket, not a low-severity complaint, a formal report. A patient had used the portal to message, "I'm having severe shortness of breath." The message was misrouted to an administrative inbox. It was not seen for 4 hours. By the time the patient was contacted, the patient was in the emergency room. The hospital filed a patient safety event report. And because of the hospital's own obligations, it triggered regulatory reporting. Now, Medura couldn't bury it. Now, the pebble was a boulder. Grant Hollowell called an emergency meeting for Monday morning. This time, Aliyah wasn't invited. Priya wasn't invited either. It was executives only, and Aliyah knew exactly why. Because the moment the incident became formal, the CEO would do what leaders like him always do. He would choose a scapegoat. Someone lower. Someone expendable. Someone who could be blamed for process failure while the people at the top protected themselves. That weekend, Aliyah barely slept. She sat at her laptop at night with the timeline open, rereading the 2019 email chain, watching the language. Do not escalate to client. Patch quietly. Keep classification low. We're not losing contracts. She thought about the patient in the emergency room. A stranger, a human being. A life that had been placed at risk because a corporation decided disclosure was too expensive. Aliyah thought about her mother, who worked registration at a clinic and had seen patients cry over delays and mistakes. And she thought about the moment Grant Hollowell looked at her and called her concern log noise. Aliyah made another choice. She printed everything. Not to distribute, to preserve, because servers can be wiped, access can be revoked, accounts can be closed, paper stays. On Sunday night, Aliyah organized a binder. Dates, tickets, emails, meeting notes, witness statements, written down as memo to self, because she was careful not to record people without permission. She labeled it simply, 6-year portal routing paper trail. Then she wrote an email to herself summarizing the core timeline so it would exist in more than one format. She didn't send it to the press. She didn't leak it online. She didn't go nuclear. She did what smart underdogs do when facing powerful enemies. She prepared. Monday morning, the company held an all-hands meeting. Grant Hollowell stood on stage in the auditorium, calm voice, polished face, the same man who had sneered at an intern for being scared. He told employees, "We experienced an isolated incident. We're addressing it immediately. Patient safety is our top priority." Aliyah watched from the back, feeling anger rise like heat. Isolated. 6 years of tickets is not isolated. Then Grant said the part Aliyah had expected. "We have identified process breakdowns in the compliance analytics flow." His eyes swept the room. "And we will be conducting a review of how certain risks were escalated or not escalated within teams." Aliyah felt the warning in his language. Because he wasn't talking about the bug, he was talking about blame. After the meeting, Priya pulled Aliyah aside. Her face was tense. They're asking for logs, they're asking for who saw what, they're already pointing fingers. Aliyah nodded. At you? Priya exhaled. At me. At support. At anyone below VP level. Aliyah's voice stayed calm. Priya, do you want to know what I found? Priya looked at her. What did you find? Aliyah hesitated for half a second, then said, 6 years. There's a paper trail. Priya's eyes widened. What kind of paper trail? Aliyah lowered her voice. An email chain from 2019. Grant acknowledged the risk and told people not to escalate it. Priya went still. Then she said quietly, forward it to me. Aliyah shook her head. Not yet, not until we decide the safest way. Priya swallowed. Aliyah, if that's real, it changes everything. It is real, Aliyah said. And it does. That afternoon, Priya got pulled into a meeting with HR and compliance leadership. She came back pale. They asked me if I ever downgraded tickets, Priya said. They asked if interns were properly supervised. They asked if I knew we were at risk. Aliyah felt her chest tighten. They're building a case. Priya nodded. They want a sacrificial narrative. Aliyah's voice dropped. Then we give them a different narrative. The next day, something unexpected happened. A woman named Elaine Mercer, Madura's board secretary and governance officer, requested a complete incident record for the board. Elaine was not a flashy executive. She didn't give speeches. She didn't post inspirational quotes on LinkedIn. Elaine was the person who lived in meeting minutes, policy documents, and legal exposure. She was the person who knew that boards didn't fear mistakes as much as they feared cover-ups. And when she requested the record, the CEO's office tried to give her the sanitized version, a summary, a bullet point deck, a carefully worded narrative. Elaine rejected it. I want original communications, she said, all of them. 6-year look back. If this risk has history, I want history. Grant Hollowell tried to control it. He couldn't, because the board had asked. And board requests are different than intern requests. Suddenly, internal teams were scrambling to assemble documents. And in that scramble, someone on the compliance team, someone with a conscience, remembered that an intern had flagged a pattern. Someone remembered Aliyah's name. At 4:18 p.m., Aliyah received a calendar invite. Meeting, governance office, Elaine Mercer. Aliyah stared at it like it was a trap. Priya read it and whispered, "This is the door." Aliyah's throat tightened. Or the guillotine. Priya shook her head. No, governance doesn't work for Grant. Governance works for the board. Aliyah showed up to Elaine Mercer's office at 4:03 p.m. with her binder in her backpack. Elaine greeted her politely and gestured to a chair. Aliyah, Elaine said, I've heard your name 3 times in the last 24 hours. Aliyah swallowed. Ma'am? Elaine's eyes were calm. They said you raised a concern about portal message routing and were dismissed. Aliyah didn't respond immediately. She didn't know what was safe. Elaine leaned forward. Let me be clear. I am not HR. I am not your manager. I am not here to evaluate your tone. I am here to protect the board from being lied to. Aliyah's heart hammered. Elaine continued. Do you have documentation? Aliyah took a breath. Yes. Elaine held out her hand. Aliyah placed the binder on the desk. Elaine opened it. And for the first time, Aliyah watched someone with real institutional power read the story the way it actually happened. Not as a narrative, as evidence. Elaine's eyes moved across the printed emails, the ticket logs, the severity downgrades, the internal language. After 3 minutes, Elaine stopped. Her voice stayed controlled, but colder now. Where did you get this? Aliyah answered carefully. internal archives and ticket systems I had access to as part of my internship. I didn't hack anything. I didn't download proprietary code. I documented what I was assigned to review. Elaine nodded. Good. She flipped to the 2019 email chain. Her jaw tightened slightly when she read Grant Hollowell's words. Then she looked up at Aliyah. Aliyah, she said, do you understand what you have here? Aliyah swallowed. Proof. Elaine nodded. Yes. And leverage. Aliyah's stomach turned. I don't want leverage. I don't want anyone hurt. And I don't want them to scapegoat Priya. Elaine's eyes narrowed slightly, thoughtful. They were going to. Aliyah stared. How do you know? Elaine tapped the binder. Because this is how institutions protect themselves. They punish a middle layer, fix a bug quietly, and pretend the top didn't know. She paused. But you have proof the top knew. Aliyah's voice trembled slightly. What happens now? Elaine closed the binder. Now, she said, we tell the truth to the board. 2 days later, a special board committee convened. Grant Hollowell entered the boardroom with his usual confidence. He expected to control the narrative. He had a deck, a story, a scapegoat plan. He did not expect to see Elaine Mercer sitting with a thick binder on the table. He did not expect to see Priya Nanduri seated beside Elaine. And he absolutely did not expect to see Aliyah Brooks, an intern, sitting quietly near the end as a witness. Grant's smile flickered. Board members filed in. Some were corporate veterans. Some were physicians. One was a former regulator. They sat down with the calmness of people who understood one thing clearly. When boards call special meetings, someone is about to lose power. The chair of the board, a woman named Marjorie Klein, spoke first. Grant, she said, we are here to review the portal message incident and any historical knowledge of related risk. Grant nodded smoothly. Of course. We take this seriously. We have already implemented a fix. Elaine Mercer raised a hand gently. Before you begin, Madam Chair, I'd like to enter into the record a 6-year timeline of internal documentation related to portal message routing. Grant's head snapped slightly toward her. Elaine, that's unnecessary. We have a summary. Marjorie Klein held up a hand. Let her speak. Elaine opened the binder. Members of the board, she said, what you were provided in the executive summary is incomplete. The risk was known as early as 2019. Tickets were repeatedly downgraded. Communications indicate deliberate suppression of client-facing escalation. Grant's face tightened. Elaine continued, calm and lethal. I will read a section from a 2019 email chain. Grant leaned forward. This is out of context. Marjorie's voice cut him off. Grant, stop. Elaine read the CEO's own words aloud. We cannot afford a client-facing disclosure. Patch quietly. Limit logs. Keep classification low. We're not losing contracts over hypothetical missed messages. The boardroom went silent. Not polite silent. The kind of silent that happens when a lie dies. Grant's throat moved as he swallowed. That email. Elaine turned another page. There are 17 similar communications over 6 years, multiple departments, multiple acknowledgements, and a pattern of severity downgrading that aligns with executive pressure. A board member, the former regulator, spoke. Grant, did you disclose this known risk in any regulatory-facing documentation? Grant's voice went tight. We didn't believe it rose to the level of... The regulator interrupted. That's not what I asked. Grant's hands tightened on his folder. No, another board member, a physician, asked, did we have patient safety exposure? Elaine answered before Grant could. Yes, and now we have a documented incident. Marjorie Klein leaned forward. Grant, were you aware of the risk? Grant hesitated, and in that hesitation, his empire cracked. Because the board didn't need confession. They had a 6-year paper trail. They had the email. They had the patent. And they had one more thing Elaine had saved for last. She turned to another document. This is the meeting note from last Wednesday, Elaine said. The meeting where this intern, Alia Brooks, raised a concern and was dismissed. Grant's face reddened. This is ridiculous. Elaine read the note, then she looked up. Alia, she said calmly, would you tell the board what happened when you spoke up? Alia's heart hammered so hard, she could feel it in her ears. She took a breath, and she told the truth. She described the tickets, the misrouting, the potential for patient harm. She described Grant's phrase, the one meant to humiliate her. The company is not run by anxiety, he'd said. It's run by strategy. She didn't dramatize it, she didn't cry. She simply stated it like a record. Then she said one sentence that landed heavier than anything else. Sir, Alia said, looking at the board, not at Grant. It wasn't that he didn't believe me, it's that he already knew. Grant's face went pale. The board froze, because in that moment, the narrative was complete. Not just negligence, not just oversight, a cover-up. Marjorie Klein sat back, eyes cold. Grant, she said, you belittled an intern for raising a risk you had known about for 6 years. Grant tried to speak, but nothing came out clean. He opened his mouth, closed it. His eyes flicked around the table as if searching for an ally. There were none. Marjorie looked at Elaine. What do you recommend? Elaine's voice was calm. Immediate removal of Grant Hollowell as CEO. Independent investigation. Full disclosure obligations reviewed. And whistleblower protections extended to the intern and her manager. Grant's voice cracked. This is insane. You're going to destroy the company. The former regulator cut in. No, Grant, you endangered it. Marjorie's voice dropped. Grant, you're done. The vote was held. Unanimous. Grant Hollowell was removed effective immediately. His keycard access was revoked before he left the building. His corporate laptop was secured by IT. His assistant was reassigned. And the company that had been built on speed and denial was forced for the first time to face the cost of silence. Alia walked out of the building that night under the orange glow of the parking lot lights, body trembling with delayed adrenaline. Priya walked beside her. Neither of them spoke at first. Then Priya said quietly, "You changed everything." Alia exhaled. I couldn't let them make me feel crazy." Priya nodded. "That's how they win. They don't have to prove you wrong. They just have to make you doubt yourself." Alia's eyes stung. "I almost did." Priya looked at her. "But you didn't." In the months that followed, Medura Systems underwent an independent compliance investigation. The portal routing bug was fixed fully, documented publicly to clients, and monitored transparently. New reporting protocols were implemented. Severity downgrades required justification and review. The company created a patient safety oversight committee that included nurses and hospital IT staff, not just executives. And, most importantly, the company established a formal intern escalation pathway, a policy designed to ensure that concerns raised by junior staff could not be buried by leadership. Alia didn't become rich. She didn't become famous. She didn't become CEO. She got something better. She got a job offer from Medura's new interim leadership, full-time after graduation in compliance engineering. She got a letter of commendation from the board, not for being brave, but for being precise. She got a recommendation from Elaine Mercer, that opened doors at other companies too. And she got something personal, something that mattered more than career. The knowledge that her voice had weight, even in rooms designed to ignore it. 1 year later, Alia sat in a lecture hall finishing her degree. Her mother, Denise, sat in the audience at her graduation, eyes shining. Afterward, Denise hugged her and whispered, "I told you, baby, don't fight for their approval. Fight for your future." Alia smiled through tears. "I fought for somebody else's future too." Denise nodded. "That's what makes it right." This story reminds us that silence is not neutrality. In systems where harm can be hidden, silence becomes protection for the people at the top. And speaking up, especially for underdogs, becomes dangerous. Alia Brooks spoke up once, and the CEO tried to make her regret it. But she had what power fears most, a paper trail. 6 years of proof that the truth had been known, buried, and protected. It wasn't her volume that mattered, it was her evidence. So ask yourself, if you were in that room and you saw an intern being belittled for telling the truth, what would you do? Would you laugh because it's safer? Would you look away because it's easier? Or would you be the person who remembers that courage is contagious and that the smallest voice in the room can sometimes be the one that saves everyone? Alia Brooks didn't become a legend. She became something better. She became undeniable. Because she understood something Grant Hollowell never would. Leadership isn't about controlling the story. Leadership is about being accountable to the truth, even when the truth comes from someone you underestimated. This story is a fictional dramatization inspired by real events of workplace retaliation, corporate cover-ups, and the power of documentation. In a world that often punishes truth-tellers and rewards silence, choose to be like Alia Brooks. Choose integrity. Choose evidence. Choose to speak, even once, if once is all you get, because sometimes once is enough.